institutions, industry professionals, and our students, on behalf of the Department of Polymer Science at Somaiya Vidya Vihar University, it is our honor to warmly welcome you to the inaugural day of 4th edition of the Somaiya Polymer Science Symposium series, themed Polymer Science Shaping Tomorrow's Innovation. We are grateful for your presence and participation in this esteemed gathering. I am Ritisha Kotian.
And I am Nahid Sheikh. We are pleased to be your host for today's proceedings. As we commence, we invite you to join us in our traditional lamp lighting ceremony. We request our esteemed dignitaries to join us on the stage for the ceremony. Honorable Chancellor Shri Samir Somaiya, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor V.N. Rajashekharan Pillai, our Chief Guest Professor Padmabhushan Balaram, Professor Sivaram, Professor Eminence and Dean Faculty of Science, Professor Anil Kumar, President SPSI, CA Monica Lodha, Director SK Somaiya College, Professor Soumyadev Ghosh, Head Department of Polymer Science and Organizing Chair of the Symposium. I respectfully request all distinguished dignitaries to take your seats. We invite Ms. Neha Kanetkar to offer the inaugural prayer. Please stand as we begin with the Somaiya campus prayer.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Ishavasyamidam sarvam Yatkincha jagatyan jagat Tena tyaktena bhunjitha Magridhakasya swidhanam Mukam karoti vachalam Pangung langhayate girim Yatkripatamaham vande Paramanandamadhavam Om Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhirvajinivati Dhinamavitravatu Om Chodayitri Sundritanam चेतन्ती सुमतीनां यज्ञं दधे सरस्वती ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतं गमय ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै सर्वेत्र सुखिनः सन्तु सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
Thank you, Ms. Neha Kanetkar.
It's now my pleasure to invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor V.N. Rajashekaran Pillai, to deliver the welcome address.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is my privilege and honor to welcome all the distinguished guests and the delegates for the 4th edition of the Polymer Symposium, hosted jointly by the Society of Polymer Science India Mumbai chapter and the Department of Polymer Science of Somaiya Vidyavihar University. This meeting is presided over by Mr. Somaiya, the Chancellor and Chancellor of this university and President of all the Somaiya Trust, a distinguished industrialist and distinguished educationist, a social activist, or I don't know, so definitely a supporter of social things, and a very well educated person who can lead education institution in the holistic perspective, Mr. Somaiya. Professor P. Balaram, Padmabhushan Professor P. Balaram, he is the chief guest of today's function. Of course, he will be introduced separately, but of course, I have the privilege of knowing him for the last almost 40 years. Ever since he was a professor in Indian Institute of Science and then in the molecular biophysics unit later, and when he was the director of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. I had also a privilege to interact with him when we hosted some events in one of the universities which I presided over in Kerala, Mahatma Gandhi University. We have Professor Shivaram. Professor Shivaram is the person, the architect behind the formation of the Mumbai chapter of the Polymer Science. He is a professor of eminence with us. He has been giving guidance for building a department of polymer science and definitely with technological background. And also, he has been instrumental in making this department industry-oriented during the last 3-4 years, ever since he was a professor of eminence here. And of course, he has been acting as the Dean of the Faculty of Science also of the university. We have Professor Anil Kumar. He is from IIT Bombay, again a product of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and he is the president of the Society of Polymer Science, India. And of course, I don't want to introduce him or anything. It is his function, to be frank. And let me welcome Dr. Anil Kumar also. I see Ms. Srimati Monica Lothar. She's the head of the SK Somaiya College, where this particular department is now located. Let me welcome her also. I recognize the presence of Professor Yadav, Professor Gadre, the Provost, Professor Shavagaonkar, my Pro-Vice Chancellor, and several other people who matter in the area of polymer science and also in higher education. I also see some of my students who were retired professors in various universities in Kerala. Sri Kumar, I recognize him. His wife Jayakumari. Number of students who have joined this particular program. Of course, then we have Soumyadev Ghosh. He is also product of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, but he was in industry for 35 years. Now he's back in academics with the Department of Polymer Science. He's a part of the organizing committee of this meeting. I see a lot of my colleagues over here. Of course, I don't want to make a big welcome remarks. Usually I talk about the university, talk about the Somaiya Vidya Vihar and all that. This particular function is the joint inauguration of this Polymer Science Symposium, which is happening for the next 3 days, and also the public lecture, a lecture by Professor Balaram in the Somaiya public lecture series. Somaiya Vidya Vihar education institutions are over 80 years old. And in higher education, we entered in 1959. And we have been a university level institution for the last for decades. All our institutions were top accredited. And of course, I don't want to make a big speech about my university and other institutions. Let me welcome all my colleagues, the members of the governing board, members of the guests from Dow Chemicals, and all the delegates of the symposium. Let me once again welcome and thank each and every one of you for your presence. And tomorrow and day after tomorrow, the symposium will be continuing, and you are here to listen to the inaugural lecture as well as the public lecture by Professor P. Balaram on science education, its future in India. And no other person is more fit to talk about it. His essays in current science. I have gone through the compilation of his essays in current science on all aspects of science. It is not just a commentary on science in India, maybe science for everything. Let me welcome all of you, all my students, all my research scholars, all our research scholars, and all our faculty members. I know this is a wrong day to have the auditorium full. It is the season, puja season, and also a Sunday evening. Otherwise this campus is full. Always you can see thousands of students in this campus, but we had to. Let me once again thank the organizing committee chaired by Dr. Ajay Ghosh. I think he said to come. Dr. Ajay Ghosh, who is a Bhatnagar professor in SRM Institute of now, and he was former director of the National Institute of Interdisciplinary Science and Technology in Trivandrum. Of course, more people will be joining towards the symposium when the things are happening. Let me welcome each and every one of you for your presence and for your blessings on this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chancellor, for your address. It is my pleasure to invite the symposium convener, Dr. Dali Davis, to the stage to give an introduction about the symposium.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sri Somaiya sir, Honorable Chancellor, Sri Samir Somaiya sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor V.N. Rajshekharan Pillai sir, our guest, Professor Balaram sir, Professor of Eminence and Dean Faculty of Science, Professor Shivaram sir, Director C.A. Monica Lodha ma'am, Head of the Polymer Science Department, Professor Soumyadev Ghur sir, and all the other dignitaries, colleagues, students, and friends. I was written that with pure joy and content we are going to do this. Now it's a little bit worry, but otherwise we achieved all the target what we thought of a symposium. This symposium series we started since 2021. The first one in the series was in August 2021. That was on, that time was the pandemic time, so it was online. It's okay. I think they can hear me. It's fine. It's okay. The second one in the series, we actually on 75th birthday of Padma Shri Professor S. Shivaram, the former president and one of the founding figures of the Society for Polymer Science India. And the third one we did on simulations in polymers, materials and biomolecules. This one, the last one, now we are organizing the 4th edition on polymer science. The theme is Shaping Tomorrow's Innovation. That is in Department of Polymer Science and in association with SPSI. We are always in association with SPSI, celebrating 75th birthday of Professor V.N. Rajshekharan Pillai. Our Honorable Vice Chancellor, who is also the founding figure of the Society for Polymer Science India and the founder of the Department of Polymer Science, our department, and the department was established by Professor V.N. Rajshekharan Pillai in 2018 when he joined Somaiya Vidyavihar as the provost. The symposium honors him with a half-day session on a subject close to his heart, that is higher education. The particular session focused on shaping minds, pedagogy, philosophy of science education, and Gen Z, which includes a Somaiya public lecture by Padmabhushan Professor P. Balaram, former Director of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. The symposium hosts 10 sessions, which include several sessions on academia and a separate session on industry, and a poster session, and a student session with the lightning talks. So this, we think that a lot of interaction would happen between industry and academia. There are 120 registered participants. I'm not seeing they will join. They will definitely join from Mumbai and outside. 22 invited talks and 5 technical sessions, technical talks. Details and the schedule are available on the symposium website. The QR codes are given outside and in the list given, so you can see that. And our department focuses on academia and industry jointly design and taught programs. Both the academia, our department stress on the industry and academia in jointly taught programs. So we are very happy and content to say that this symposium is generously supported by academia and industry. So wishing you an engaging and innovative 2.5 days dynamic discussion and brainstorming session during the symposium. Thank you. Before that, I would request Chancellor Samisa to release the book of abstract. And Professor Anil Kumar, please receive that from Chancellor. Everybody can together.
Thank you, Dali ma'am. Now it's my privilege to invite our Honorable Chancellor, Shri Samir Somaiya, to deliver the inaugural and presidential address.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Balaram, welcome to our campus. Dr. Pillai, very happy birthday. I know it's not today, but still, a very happy birthday to you. May you have many more. Dr. Anil Kumar, Dr. Sivaram, whom I know for so many years, Monica Lodha, Dr. Ghosh, Dr. Yadav, whom I know for years, Dr. Shivgankar, everybody here, Achala, Dr. Gadre, Dr. Mod, Raman, everybody, thank you very much. So I know very little about polymers, so I'll talk a little bit in general. But I'm reminded of 1986, when I wanted to study in the US. And my grandfather said, why don't you study here? And when I told him that I was going to go to study at Cornell, which I told him is a world-class place, and we were not here a world-class place, he immediately said to me to go, but endeavor to make this as good as where I wanted to go. So setting the stage, setting expectations, of my return, and a commitment also from that return. Sir, please.
We welcome Professor M.M. Sharma.
Professor Sharma is my friend, philosopher and guide. And I look forward to his guidance and every now and then a little bit of his scolding. And that keeps us going. After 86, I'm reminded of 1993 when I returned to India. And our then Finance Minister, Manmohan Singh, had liberalized India. Liberalized meant under the pressure of the IMF, we had reduced import duties of all our products, and India was suddenly exposed to global competition. At that time, my father, having high expectations of a young Masters of Engineering student, thought that I could single-handedly create a research kind of system in our company. And very interestingly, he told me the place to go to, with all, no offense to IIT, but he asked me to go to UDCT. And he said, you must meet Professor Sharma, and I did. Professor Sharma actually asked me to then meet Dr. Chandalia. I don't know if Professor Sharma even remembers that meeting that we had, and we started thinking about innovating in chemistry. Of course, it's a long time since, but in those days, there was no IP protection in India. The way to do chemical research was to get an employee of the neighboring factory's engineer, getting there and copy that technology. And my father was pretty clear that's not the path we want to go in this liberalized world. And we tried to create a research department to start thinking about technology and how we go forward. In those days, even in the world of sugar, we only looked at the West or the East. You looked at Australia, you looked at Mauritius, or you looked at the sugar beet factories in Germany. You never, today, in fact, it is India and Brazil which are leading, at least from even a technology standpoint. In 2002 or 2001 and 2, there was the Nimitli program. That's where Dr. Sivaram and I engaged, even though we met a little before when he was head of NCL. And in the Nimetli program, Dr. Mashelkar encouraged us to think of new millennium technologies. Blue sky thinking, what can be done? Whether it would be cellulose-based, bagasse-based products, whether it would be biopolymers. And Professor Sharma, from then on, would goad the program forward. I will say to him, Der aaye durust aaye, but this is something that we will be doing now. But this is, what I'm trying to say is, how do you think future into the future? How do you think about science? How do you think about thinking for yourself? How do you think about being self-reliant? How do you think about not just doing things which you want to copy from the West, or look to the West and go there with a kind of a, please give us technology, please license us technology, a whole different world. And I'm very happy to say that today the world kind of worked. My company, I run a company. I've been introduced here as the Chancellor of the university, but for a moment I'm talking as my company called Godavari Biorefineries. Has been invited to speak today at the plenary at the Alternative Fuel and Chemical Program in Washington, D.C. in November, and also to speak at the Nova Institute in Germany next year to speak on biorefining. So it's what I'm trying to say is it's a whole world away from where we were 15, 20 years ago, when we used to look to people as to what is it that they are doing. And instead, now we are being asked to speak at a plenary, which is, I think it's quite good. We sit next to people who are much larger companies, but we find ourselves innovating in the biorefining space. Now, if I think about this in terms of education, Dr. Pillai mentioned that we became, although we are in education from 1942 as a primary school, in higher education from 1959, which is here on this campus, and as a private university, self-financed university since 2019. So in many ways, the world of liberalization that we saw in industry, which was 1993 onwards, we are seeing in higher education here. And if I come full circle to the commitment that I was taken from me to try and build a campus which is world-class, this is what we are setting ourselves to do, to create a vision of a multidisciplinary university that excels in teaching, excels in research, and without forgetting our aim, in service of the people around us, in service of humanity. My grandfather always would say, Na manushat paro dharma, which is there is no religion greater than service to humanity. And so that's what we are here trying to create. We need to create multidisciplinary university, also research, whether it's in the depth of the field or at the interface of disciplines. And we want to work also at the interface, whether it's the interface of companies, scientists, faculty members, students, startups, all of them together coming, and that's the kind of world that we want to create here. Our students also have to be holistically taught, and in that holistic teaching, whether it be an understanding of aesthetics, sports, nature, literature, spirituality, and of course, science. Because everybody must understand that rationality should underpin a lot of the work that we do. So this is the world that we seek to create in this university. We want to be, as India, I think our time has come. And in the next 20 years, I want to talk about my brother-in-law, Sean Reagan here. He came here to visit this campus last week with his daughter, who's doing his master's in the US. They are American, they live there. And after she toured the campus here 2 days ago, she did ask, and I took her to meet Raman, and she did ask whether she had a possibility of doing an exchange program here from her US university. So I think, I don't think this would be possible, say, 30 years ago, where students would do that, and I'm very delighted that this is the kind of environment we want to create. So thank you for this program, sir, on doing this Polymer Science Symposium here. I thank Professor from IIT, Anil Kumarji, to do this as the Polymer Science. So thank you very much. And Dr. Pillai, once again, a very warm, happy birthday in advance. And I'm delighted that this is the way. I mean, it shows his commitment to science. It shows his commitment to polymer science that the whole community is celebrating his 75th birthday with a festival on science. Thank you.
We are grateful for your thoughtful remarks, sir.
I would like to invite Professor Anil Kumar, President of SPSI, to deliver his presidential address.
Good afternoon to all. Before I start, comment on Mr. Somaiya that he joined UDCT over IIT. I think all those who joined chemical engineering of IIT did not get admission in UDCT. So UDCT was the place, is the place for chemical engineering. Okay. So wonderful. So dignitaries on the dais, in the audience, 3 of my teachers on the dais, couple of them in the audience. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome you on behalf of the Society for Polymer Science India. So it's a national society, and we run this society through 10 chapters, the local chapters, and we conduct events around the country. And our main gathering is the biannual event, which typically happens in December, and that the next event will be scheduled for the December of 25th at IIT Kharagpur. And 2 of the pillars of the society, Professor Shivram and Professor Pillai, they are all on the dais. And they have built up this society, and I have seen them from my student days. So when I was a student in IISC, Professor Pillai used to come there, and we used to learn about peptide synthesis. And it was a wonderful time to interact with him. He's among us now. Many of you may not know, he was in hospital till noon today. So he's been discharged from hospital, and 3 o'clock he's here. So his untiring support and dedication to the community and to all of us is unbelievable. And he has been a fatherly figure, a pillar to many, many generations. And his contribution is amazing. And his energy level is incredible. So wonderful to be part of this, which is the symposium 4th in this series. And it's jointly held by or organized by Mumbai chapter as well as the Somaiya. So Bombay chapter happens to be the youngest of the 10 chapters, and is now becoming the most vibrant chapter, thanks to the community here. And we have now, this is the 4th in 4 years, the event we are conducting, and hope we continue this tradition of getting people from academia and industry and expose students to the way things are evolving. And it's interesting time to live in because a lot of technology changes are happening. And students are really exposed to all types of different technologies, different education. The boundaries and barriers are no more. So I think one of the best time to live in, people say COVID was a tough time, but I think those who survived is the best time to live in. Education has become so open after COVID. Everything what you want to learn, the best teachers, the lecture notes are all available to you. And of course, a lot of wrong things are also available to you. So you have to really decide. But you can't say now that you want to learn something and it's not accessible to you. Gone are the eras when you used to go to Gurukul to learn anything or to the great places. Initial learning can be done. And we really promote education and research through society. We conduct various events. And I'm happy to see large number of students and participants here. And I look forward to the deliberations over the next 2 days. And I wish this symposium a good success and a lot of interaction to come between academic and industries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Anil Kumar.
It's my honor to invite our director, SK Somaiya College, CA Monica Lodha, to address the gathering.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to address this gathering. Chancellor Sir, Somaiya ji, Vice Chancellor V.N. Rajshekaran Pillai Sir, M.M. Sharma Sir, Dr. Shivram Sir, Dr. B. Balaram Sir, Dr. Ghosh, Dr. Shivgaonkar Sir, all deans and HOIs, and Yadav Sir also amongst the dignitaries, sir. And if I've missed any dignitary's name, please, I have a sincere apologies from my side. But I take this privilege to welcome all the guests and to this 4th edition of Polymer Science Symposia, jointly organized by Department of Polymer Science and SPSI Mumbai chapter. I recollect very well since 2020 when the Department of Polymer Science was, inducted in Somaiya Vidya Vihar University. Now it's third batch which has been passed out last in the third convocation. And we have now good number of alumni who are being placed in various industries, and I can see those industries are collaborators for this particular symposia, like Pidilite, Asian Paints, Clariant, etc. We have, I just want to say one thing from here, that we have star of wisdoms coming through in the next 2.5 day symposium time. And I would request students and all the dignitaries to take much of it. As rightly said by Anil Kumar sir, we have got a lot of information across. You have a click and you get an information. But the experience which these dignitaries will be sharing over a period of 2.5 days is the thing which you need to cherish, and you need to bundle it up in your minds and take it in your hearts and just go with that particular flow. The new things what you will be learning in this 2.5 days of your learning phase for the students, for the research scholars of this university, and the ICT students, and the students who have registered for this particular symposia. So this is the only thing what I would like to say. I would like to also mention a few names who have been who will be coming as a speaker. And I would also welcome on behalf of the Department of Polymer Science, Professor Ajay Ghosh, Anubhav Saxena, Dr. Asha SK, Dr. Jignesh Shukla, Dr. Ajish Kumar, Dr. Rahul Singte, Professor Hani John, Professor K. Shri Kumar, Professor Priyadarshi Day, Professor Subi George, Dr. Shubhra Mohanty, Professor Hemlata Bagla, to name the few who will be enlightening the sessions on the coming days. So thank you. Welcome all.
Thank you, Monica ma'am, for your enlightening remarks.
It is my honor to invite Professor Sivaram, Professor of Eminence and Dean Faculty of Science, Somaiya Vidya Vihar University, to the stage to deliver a felicitation address. We would request Professor M.M. Sharma to address the gathering and inspire us with his kind words.
Well, we are in the Somaiya campus, so I must start with tributes to Samir. The way he is steering these programs, I sometimes wonder whether he's in Somaiya Hospital or whether he's in Vidya Vihar or whether he's in his alcohol complex or sugar complex. I don't know where all this is. Good that he takes a lot of interest and he loves lecturing. I'm very happy that you are paying tributes to Rajshekhar Pillai, whom I had pleasure of knowing for a fairly long time. From the days of UGC, when he was about to become, he was vice chairman, but he was about to become chairman. And circumstances worked in a different way. Then he was in the Indira Gandhi Open University when I happened to give a talk. Then, ever since he has come here, I've had many interactions, and when they ushered in the Polymer Science and Technology course, I gave the inaugural address. Polymers are really wonderful materials, and you have a person who breathes polymer day in and day out, Shivaram. The way it has changed our life. But I still want to usher in something different. And Samir made a reference to Nimitli program. I have yet to see the real success in valorizing bagasse. And I mentioned this for various reasons. If the cellulose from there can be used for CMC, carboxymethyl cellulose, I see no reason why CMC films, which will be biodegradable, cannot replace polyethylene. Sivaram may or may not agree. Cellophane was used long before polyethylene. Why we are ignoring cellophane? But I have read treatise on CMC-based films which are biodegradable and it's relatively easy to make. And lignin can usher in, I mean, for the number of papers I would have provided to, has Sangeeta come or not? Well, you would have had a glimpse of some of these papers. I think by now, probably not less than 50 papers, if not more, on lignin, and how lignin can usher in totally new type of polymeric substances, make even particle boards and all, instead of phenol formaldehyde resin. Polymer is a very vast field, and the kind of advances it has seen and continues to see. And sometimes the technology becomes a villain. That polyethylene film became thinner and thinner, stronger and stronger, and created problem for disposal. I wish the thinning of polyethylene film was not done. Then people would not have raised so many objections. Anyway, today is the day and you are honoring a person who richly deserves all this honor. He has provided great leadership as a Vice Chancellor here, came with rich experience. We also have, you are called Provost, no? Shirgaon? Yeah. I think Samir has been able to line up very talented people, which speaks volumes about how people feel attracted to Somaiya Vidyavihar and Somaiya. I have seen myself, in fact, whenever I come here and have a meeting, Samir and I decide to take a walk because this is the best campus of any educational institute in Bombay. Without a shadow of doubt. I wish the Kalina campus of my old erstwhile university would have been as good. Of course, IIT bit away. Not so away now, but it was once upon a time really away. But there is still some charm because much smaller than the size of the IIT campus. Within the size, to see the level of greening here is really very satisfying, and I always take a walk whenever we have some meeting here. So I wish to pay my own tributes to Rajshekhar Pillai. I also want to compliment Samir for providing leadership for programs in the entire outfits of Somaiya family. And I wish this gathering today and tomorrow also, 3 days, all the success. I think you can't cover everything in 3 days, but 3 days is also too long, you know. People get exhausted. 2 days, I think, is ideal in many ways, because 1 day is very difficult to cover. Nice to see good audience. I wish all the success for this program. I'm sorry I was late. I had already informed them that I cannot come before 3, but I did come before that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor M.M. Sharma from UD City, for such kind and insightful knowledge about polymer science.
It's my honor to invite Professor S. Shivaram to deliver the felicitation address to our VC's 75th birthday.
Thank you so much. A very good evening to everyone today. It's such a wonderful occasion that we are gathered to celebrate and commemorate a great life of 75 years of Professor Rajshekhar Pillai. Samir, Somaiya on the dais, Professor M.M. Sharma. Of course, he said Samir, I have known him since around late 90s. Professor Rajshekhar Pillai, I have known him for 40 years now. I met him for the first time in 1985. So it's been 40 years that I have known him. Then we have Professor Balaram, and this gentleman, I have known him from 1968. So you can add that. So when he came as a student to join IIT Kanpur, and I was about to leave IIT Kanpur after my master's degree, and I have known him since that time. So it's been close to now 50 odd years, Professor Sharma, whom I have known from 1978, or 77. So when I was working at the Indian Petrochemicals Corporation Limited in Vadodara, he was also our great guru for us, because I learned quite a bit of petrochemicals, because I never had an exposure to this, and he taught me quite a bit of petrochemicals and to some extent practical aspects of polymers at the time. So Monica Aloda, with whom I've had the pleasure of working for the last 4 or 5 years, for her very dynamic leadership of the college and all the support that she gives to every program that we have here. Professor Swamidev Ghosh, who has, I have known him also for a very long time, but here in Somaiya for the last few years, where he is trying to organize a lot of activities in terms of both teaching, learning, and outreach with industry. Anil Kumar, whom I have known him from 90s. So you know how old I am, therefore, okay, so it looks like I'm a very ancient guy here, so I am very old, okay, so don't worry, I am one of the most ancient person here, because I know every...
Dr. Sharma, I'm not old.
So that's one of the reasons why, if I have been around as long as I have been in this country, it's impossible for me not to have known these people. So I think it's a great occasion. We thought that we should commemorate the life of Professor Rajshekaran Pillai. Now, Rajshekaran Pillai has had many avatars, okay, in his life. So I don't want to speak about all his multifarious avatars in his life, but what I have seen him in the last 5 years very closely at this campus, a phenomenal bundle of energy. I think his wife is not very happy with that, So, and I think the amount of energy, the amount of time he spends, dealing with the affairs of the university, but a man of ideas. All the time asking, why can't we do this differently? And I think that's the spirit of innovation in education. Nothing for him is acceptable. I've been working very closely with him. We sit in his office till 8 p.m. I'm sorry for that, 8 or 9 p.m., having both lunch and dinner together here. But that's because he's passionate. He's very passionate about education. He wants to make Somaiya Vidya Vihar one of the finest centers of education. And I think he's all the time looking at what do we have to do more? What do we have to do? And I've had no problems working with him, because every idea I take it to him, and it's just a signature away as far as the implementation goes. And there are lots of people in this audience whose faces are very familiar to me, who also understand the passion that he brings to this activity. And because of that, we are able to get things done in a manner here which by the way, I have worked all my life in publicly funded institutions, and I am very proud to say that what Professor Rajshekaran Pillai can do in 3 months, publicly funded institutions can do it in 2 years. So that's the speed with which he implements decision, he takes action, and I think it's all because of the fact that he is 24/7 committed to this great institution. Thank you, Professor Rajshekaran Pillai, for this opportunity for all of us to work with you, in some way contribute to the vision that you have, and hope that Samir and Rajshekaran Pillai together will take this institute to much greater heights. I hope also that this is the 4th edition of the symposium. In fact, Professor Rajshekaran Pillai has always been saying that you must organize something every year. Keep the momentum, keep the spirit of science flowing, keep that innovation, keep ideas happening here. Let this be a gathering place for people to come and talk about science. And I hope that this spirit, that's why I asked them to number this. It's now called the 4th edition. I hope there'll be a 5th and the 6th and the 7th edition going forward. And I hope that this place will become a vibrant place for people to gather, talk, discuss, and generate new ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Sivaram, for such a heartfelt speech.
I request the Head Department of Polymer Science, Professor Somaiya Ghosh, to deliver the vote of thanks.
It's an honor to thank all the gatherings here. First of all, I'm honored, Honorable Chancellor Somaiya ji, thank you for coming to inaugurate this historical event. We know you have a busy schedule today. Thank you, sir, for your kind word. Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Rajashekaran Pillai, thank you, sir, for your constant encouragement. And encouragement is a nice word I am using, but his push for us to scale new heights. We are always we are encouraged to go ahead. And we are a small team, still we are, this is, I think, quite satisfying level we are taking this. So getting this kind of gathering is due to such kind of constant encouragement from him and his support. Many thanks to Anil Kumar, President SPSI, our partner for the National Symposium, for his timely support whenever needed. We'd like to thank our mentor, Professor Dr. Shivram, Professor of Eminence, for being our guiding line for the long time. Thanks to our director, Monica Lodha, for her constant support in adjusting to our special needs all the time. We look forward to a great evening ahead. The personalities I see on stage and also in the audience, they define this historical moment. Professor Balaram, Dr. Shivram, Professor Pillai, Professor Yadav, Professor M.M. Sharma, and many other eminent people who are there. They are the people who have been the force behind the growth of country's chemical industry. It is their students who are leading at the frontiers of science at global level, creating new organizations and developing new plants. We thank them all for gracing this occasion. The industry acknowledges this, as you see in the banner below. We thank their support and welcome the delegates from the industries. We welcome the dignitaries from the academia, from the industries, the speakers, and all the guests. Thank you for coming on this Sunday afternoon. And of course, a big thanks to Dr. Daly Davis, who is spearheading our efforts in organizing this national symposium this year. It is incredible, madam, the way you are leading this program. With the guidance of the National Organizing Committee and its chairman, Professor Ajay Ghosh. Thanks to the local organizing committee constantly being with us. Last but not the least, thanks to my department colleagues, our students, for their tireless effort. Mr. Hemant Vaidande, who is also an integral part of our team. Of course, thank you, Dr. Rukande, sir. He may not be here, who at the last moment agreed to give this auditorium to us. There is some function that will happen tomorrow, so it will be, we have to end the program at a particular time. And Dr. Ramachandran, who has allowed to use the auditorium, also changing some schedule where the main symposium will take place from tomorrow. We can confidently, with this support, look forward to a great, fruitful national symposium. I wish you all a great evening and the next 2 days of learning and exchanges. Thank you all for coming, and we proceed to the second session. The technical session starts now. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
So now we conclude our inaugural session and we move on to the next segment of our conference.
They are reorganizing the stage. Let me finish my duty to introduce, as I said, somebody whom I have known for a very long time. Professor Balaram, who has come here this afternoon to speak to us. I don't think he needs too much of an introduction to those who have been in science, either in any scientific field in this country. He has had a very long and distinguished career at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He was the director of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and a deep thinker, a scholar, and of course, you will just listen to him, possibly one of the finest speakers that you could ever listen to, okay? So I don't want to stand between you and him. Professor Balaram is a multifaceted personality. I don't want to talk about where he got his PhD and what he did, because those are all easy to get today. Just go to your mobile phone and just put Balaram and you will get thousands of entries. So I don't want to talk about that. But I think what I want to talk about, the kind of impact he has created, not only in science, but in science-related policies, science-related directions in this country. He is also pretty frank in expressing his opinion, which is also makes him a person to listen to very carefully, because he has ideas that are very forthright, that he is willing to talk about openly. And that's a kind of a personality that has made him somebody whom we all respect significantly in this country. Professor Balaram continues to be active both in science as well as in a variety of science-related areas. Currently, he is with the, I don't know, where are you today? Okay, where are you today?
NCBS.
NCBS, okay. But he doesn't need an affiliation, honestly speaking, As I said, I have known him from 1967. So, I have had the privilege of knowing him when he had just finished his bachelor's degree and was coming to a master's degree. And at that time, Professor C.N.R. Rao told me that this is a young person whom we should have in the IIT Kanpur department for a master's program. And I was passing out of my master's, and I had this great privilege of talking to him to come and join IIT Kanpur at the instruction of Professor C.N.R. Rao. And the rest, as I say, is history. And so it's a great pleasure for me to welcome Professor Balaram. I'm glad he accepted an invitation to speak to us today. And he's also somebody whom Professor Pillai knows very well. So I think it sets the stage for a grand celebration of science and science education today in honor of Professor Pillai. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Professor Shivram and Professor Somaiya Ghosh for inviting me. Shivram's already given the reason. At Kanpur, we are very respectful to our seniors, and so once he asked me to come, I couldn't say no. And so I'm here. But it also turned out that I agreed because it was Professor Rajashekaran Pillai's 75th birthday celebration, and I've known him also for a very long time. If you take my picture off and put my first slide on, that would be much better. The audience will judge for itself whether anything that's written on the first slide is meaningful or not. Gosh. The first slide came on briefly and disappeared. I haven't come here to speak on polymer science. I'm not a polymer scientist, although Dr. Pillai and I shared an initial interest in peptide synthesis, except that he wanted to make it on polymer supports, and I was making it in the liquid state. But otherwise, I was given the task, at least Shivram gave me a mandate, and the mandate was to talk on higher education in India. Some aspect of higher education because of Dr. Pillai's long contributions in various academic administrative positions in India, at the UGC, at the Indira Gandhi University, at the Mahatma Gandhi University, and so on. So he's had a very extensive stint in many, many very important educational organizations. Now, of course, Shivram also said that I sometimes speak my mind, and that isn't a completely wrong thing to do. It's probably a good thing to do. And I subtitled my talk, therefore, as an uncertain and challenging future. So when you talk about such a topic when you're quite old, you have to ask the question, what shaped your mind? And your mind is generally shaped by the places where you've studied, where you've worked, and where you've spent your professional career. And these are the three institutions that I've seen ever since I started studying science. The Ferguson College in Pune, established long, long ago, a part of India's history, pre-colonial history, 1885. And then IIT Kanpur, which is a part of post-independence India's history, 1959, and then of course the Indian Institute of Science, which straddles both the past and the present and will also probably be important in the future, which is where I spent all my professional career. I don't have anything to control the slides with, but could I have something, or will you change it? Thank you. Huh? Wonderful. When you use the word higher education, as far as I'm concerned, there are 3 or 4 areas where I've been interested. The first is undergraduate education, then postgraduate education, doctoral education to get PhDs, and then of course quite importantly, postdoctoral education, where people with PhDs specialize still further. This is very important today in all modern areas of science, because almost nobody gets going in an independent career without substantial postdoctoral experience. And therefore, all of this can be counted as education. What are we worried about when we think about higher education? We're worried about research, we are worried about teaching, and today increasingly, I would say, we are not only worried, but we are also obsessed by rankings. Now, I'm going to quickly flash a few slides for you. And I officially retired from the Indian Institute of Science a little over 10 years ago. And over the last 10 years, the last decade or so, most of our leadership, irrespective of their political persuasion, have lamented on the state of Indian science. Here's one, here are many more, and you can see with a quick glance at the slides that Indian higher education doesn't seem to have a very high opinion amongst those who lead us. It's not only the politicians, it's also the scientists sometimes, and it's also the people who've become very famous because they've made a lot of money. And therefore, whether you're in business, you're in the business of education, or whether you're in the business of running the country, all of them seem to find higher education as a whipping boy. Now, more recently, very recently, few weeks ago, the president said that research should be encouraged in the education system. Now, yes, research should be encouraged. The question you can ask is, has research been encouraged in the last 75 years since we became independent? Or 75 years, now it's slowly going to 77. This has just come out. This is the World University Rankings. Because you're obsessed with rankings, I put this up. Because as soon as the ranking comes out, I get a lot of WhatsApp messages from different people who then send me the links. Now you can see the table on my left is the table of the top 10 universities in the world. Now, you can name the top 10 universities in the world, you can name the top 20, and the top 10 will be a subset of the top 20. And I think all of us would get it right. You don't need any rankings. It's been like this since the rankings began in 2003, and it will remain like this over the next 10, 20 years. It isn't going to change. The Indian rankings, on the other hand, in the same list are there. And there you can see, if I looked at it, I should feel happy because my own institution, where I spent more than 4 decades, is right up on top among the Indian institutions. It's actually gone down a little bit, but that's just the numbers fluctuating. It doesn't make any sense. But then you look at the others which are there, and you ask yourself the question, how many of them can you recognize? Some of the IITs may not have participated in this particular ranking because they're now boycotting this ranking. But if they did participate in this ranking, they would still be somewhere in this region only. But you will find that there are institutions which you've never heard about, and you would suddenly look at this and think that maybe India is the world's leading center for dentistry, because there's a dental university which is right up on top in the international rankings. But are the international rankings important? They are. They are important. Because you will see that the international rankings have been encouraged really by the highest in the land. And it turns out that some years ago, the rankings annually would be released in Rashtrapati Bhavan. And I think this is a situation into which we've gotten ourselves in, and we are now completely a prisoner of the rankings. Since we don't go up the rankings in the international rankings, what we've decided to do now is to introduce our own ranking system, which is the NIRF ranking. So it doesn't matter where you go in universities, people are worried about how to get the NIRF ranks up. You should look at those lists carefully, and you will see how marks are given. And you will find that suddenly you will find an institution which has got 12% foreign students. And I don't believe that there is any institution into which you can walk into the campus and find 12% of the people at least look to you like they're foreign students. What about higher education and research in India? What about its past? Because if we look at its past, maybe we can sort of rationalize the present and maybe imagine the future. And 1857 is the post-Macaulay period where the universities were actually set up. Before that, English education had actually been introduced in Bengal by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, because he realized that possibly English was one way of transforming society in many ways to get rid of old problems. 1876, India's first research institution envisaged by Mahendralal Sarkar. 1909 was the order for starting the Indian Institute of Science. It had a 13-year gestation period at that time. And of course, Lord Curzon, when he looked at the scheme in the early part of the last century, he said it appears to have no relation to charity, to suffering, to the Queen, or to the 300 million people in India. Now we are, of course, 1.4 billion people in India, and you might ask, does the entire edifice of higher education in India have any relevance to the 1.4 billion people? That's the question that one must be asking. Now, research and teaching itself are interlinked in a way that you can't really separate one from the other. There is no researcher who doesn't have to learn, and you can't learn unless you teach it, the subject. And every time you teach something, you get better at it. Mahendralal Sarkar said this very well in 1900. He said the words chief and greatest discoveries have been made by those who had or have to teach. And he says educational institutions provide the best laboratories for research. We've, however, in the post-independence era, invested in a lot of pure research institutions. And there are many models that one can follow. We know all the models. I think Stanford now has become a model which anybody who has a lot of money in India is trying to imitate. And it turns out that you can't have Stanford without the faculty. You can't have Stanford without the students. You can't have Stanford only with the money that Stanford has. The Indian models have been there. They've been there after independence. They've been there before independence. Kolkata, Madras, Delhi, Banaras, Allahabad, all of them did wonderful work. In many places, the best work in India emerged in that period. It emerged in the period between the 1920s and I will say 1970. It is in that period that many of the universities produced a lot of extraordinarily good work. Afterwards, the number of places diminished very substantially. There's a surge of research in the 50s and 60s. In the 70s, one can actually see there's a decay in many places. In many of the old universities, as the political landscape of India changed, as the states changed, as local conditions changed, universities, the state universities began to decay. We've also had arguments about specialist institutions versus broad-based institutions. Should they be small or should they be large? This has gone on for a very long time. I put this up just to show you a taxonomy of institutions. There are all kinds of institutions. We still have affiliated colleges, autonomous colleges, many of them. There are now even all the research institutions together now have a university. It's an academy. It gives degrees. And ironically, I've been named the chancellor of that. And so I sign on the degrees. So I sign on enough PhD degrees to make even Professor M.M. Sharma happy. Because for a long time, he used to come to the council when I was the director and tell me, you must increase the number of PhDs. Today, I would like to tell him, I'm worried about the number of PhDs that we are producing. Then we have deemed and customized universities set up by the atomic energy, space, defense. Everybody has a university. the idea of a university itself appears to have disappeared in the midst of all this expansion. Everybody knows what you have to do to create an ambience. You need governance which must be good, it must be liberal, it must be academic. Faculty and student performance must be of the highest order. There must be research facilities and you must promote scholarship. Is it possible to do all this in many of our institutions? Public institutions and maybe private institutions. Now, when I listened to the introductory remarks, I realized that liberalization of the economy began in 1991. Liberalization of the Indian education system appears to have begun with the new group of private universities, which have really started only after I retired officially from the Indian Institute of Science, very recently. We know what the parameters of institutional performance are. We don't need the ranking system to tell us. We can do it ourselves. And we need, of course, private philanthropy, which has always been there and is increasing in India, which is probably the one good sign that we have, possibly a silver lining in an otherwise dark, cloudy environment. Now, this is what will always happen to these. The battery runs out very, very quickly. These are the current problems that I would like to highlight. There are general problems and there are specific problems. The general problems are there's a mismatch between aspiration and financial commitment. We can't make an Indian university get into the top 100 in the international rankings if you don't have adequate financial commitment. That's for public institutions. We also have a populist expansion in a resource-constrained environment. We have started institutions everywhere. We multiplied them because populism means that you must have an institution in every state. You must have an All India Institute of Medical Science in every state, even if you can't provide it funds. We have institutes for pharmaceutical education and research, many of them. And every one that you go to, you come away with a slight sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. Then there's the state versus center in the influences on higher education. This is one of our major problems, that the states and the center are invariably pulling in some direction or the other. Sometimes even if they're pulling in the same direction, it is dangerous. It turns out that generally the states and the center should permit academic institutions to be governed academically. There's a extraordinarily non-academic focus of the regulatory bodies in Indian education. There are specific problems, and this is one which concerns me most now. Very poor employment prospects for students emerging from master's and PhD programs in many disciplines. The PhD level unemployment now and underemployment is staggering. Everybody tries to go abroad. They remain abroad. They are postdoctoral fellows till they are 50 years old. We have produced them. They are neither able to make very good careers for themselves, nor are they able to contribute effectively to the country's progress. There's depleting faculty strength in many old universities and decaying infrastructure. There are departments with 3 people, 2 people, sometimes 1. And courses are still conducted with guest faculty. Even universities in the national capital run with guest faculty who have been guest faculty not for 5 years, not for 10 years, sometimes for 15 years. And we have a complete inability to modernize and rationalize curricula. Anil Kumar mentioned that today nobody can say that they can't understand anything because they can find the internet. But if you can be educated on the internet, there's probably no particular reason to have a university. Everybody can study on their own, listening to all the lectures on physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, which are available on the internet. So we have to ask ourselves some questions. And can you help me move this forward? Huh? Oh, that's right. Ah, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Where did I go? What do we turn to? We turn to policy. And the one thing we're very good at is making policy, although it takes us a very long time to make it. The new education policy was in gestation for about a decade. And when it was finally born, there it is. The ministry has changed its name from Human Resource Development to Education. So the focus is back on education now, not on the development of human resource. In between, employment seemed to be the most important thing. Education seemed much less significant. It's got a wonderful motif which tells you the influence of eminent mathematicians on the new education policy. It's the Mobius strip, and it says that the policy envisages the creation, transmission, use, and dissemination of knowledge as a part of this continuum. You can never get away from the Mobius strip. Once you're on it, you can go round and round. I had to point there. Okay. Wonderful. I think what I'll do is I'll point it at you and you click. Huh? And the principles of the policy, the same thing's been written over and over again, many times before this also. It's very nice. It says that we need citizens for building an equitable, inclusive, and plural society as envisioned by our Constitution. The Constitution, of course, is a much maligned document. And there are many stated aims of the national education policy. They've been summarized in part. You can say that higher education institutions need to be empowered through autonomy. So autonomy is a very important criterion. Then there must be teacher training in the national education policy. And what is a university? This definition of a university is from 1955, Annamalai University's Jubilee. And it says that university teaching one special subject is a contradiction in terms. Yet we have language universities, music universities, we have all kinds of universities. It is opposed to the basic idea of a university, which is a corporation of teachers and students engaged in a variety of studies. Corporate social life and a liberal education are its differentia. So the word liberal was used a long time ago in this context of defining what a university is. But today it doesn't matter. Wherever you get in, whichever university, however you manage to get in, even into a PhD program, you can't get in unless you've passed the NET. And if you have to pass the NET, we have the situation. This is a cartoon from Bangladesh many years ago. It applies to us too, and it hasn't done Bangladesh very much good. And everybody has to sit for the same examination, and you don't know how to really admit students. This is an old cartoon. Unfortunately, Lakshman's gone, therefore you can't have such commentary anymore nowadays, but this was during the anti-Hindi agitation of the 1960s. Language surfaced again when the new education policy was released in 2020. Once again, there was this big debate about the language of education. Here, of course, you can see the student throwing rocks there. He had got assurances. Jawaharlal Nehru had given an assurance then there will be no Hindi. And but then you can see the two former chief ministers of Madras, Rajagopalachari on one side and Bhaktavatsala on the other. They're wondering why the students still throwing stones until a bystander tells them that the boy can't read English either. So nowadays we have a situation in which you will find that students can't read their mother tongue, their students can't read English, and the students can't read the local language either. So linguistic skills, by trying to push things forward, we've actually pushed things backward in many ways. And many of you will see this happens. We've had the same problem with science resolutions. We have policies, many policies. You can see that they've spanned decades. And some of them Professor Sharma will be familiar with. And they'll all say the same thing. Nothing will happen after that. And you can ask the question, has anything evolved? You know, evolution is a very important term in biology. It's also a very important term generally. We all evolve. We evolve over the course of our careers. Has education policy evolved in 21st century India? The answer really would be no. And you can see that the same policy has been written before. 2009, people have asked this question, and nothing's really happened. The people change, the parties change, but things go on as ever. I remember in 2009, there was a 100-day agenda to revamp the education system. And this, of course, produced the new regulatory body for education, which was now to surpass, surmount, and transform beyond the UGC. And one just wonders what happened to all those recommendations of 2009. Policy cannot be implemented. Now, I looked at the draft national education policy and the final policy as it came. And since you can now use on a PDF file Control F and find out the word occurrences, I did a little exercise. And then you can see how many times, how the policy has actually been edited. There are many words which come. The most interesting one was the University Grants Commission. It appeared 25 times in the draft. It appeared only twice in the final policy. And that too, one, it appeared with respect to research funding. And as most of you would know, the University Grants Commission doesn't give any more grants. It hardly gives any grant at all. So it's more of a University Governance Commission. And the other one is in the list of abbreviations. So some level of care should be there. This is a picture that I've taken from a Scientific American, which calls this education stool, just school, university, and research. And if you ask what should people learn in the curricula, this is what is there in the new education policy. Artificial intelligence appears 8 times, mathematics 26 times, computer science 26 times, physics comes once, chemistry comes once, and biology comes once. And you must look at this and ask the question, your children, grandchildren, and the future, is this the kind of curriculum that one should be recommending? And sometimes we take these policies as the Bible and react to them. In 2019, the science academies were asked their views on this document. I am not a great fan of the science academies myself, but I looked at what it said. And that 4-year bachelor's programs, that was supported by the science academies. Then transforming the regulatory system, that was opposed by the science academies. And some journalist actually put this little cartoon and said, is the UGC the new caged parrot? The caged parrot is usually used, a metaphor used for the CBI and the Enforcement Directorate and other such rather formidable bodies. But the UGC is also a pretty formidable body nowadays. Then the National Research Foundation, about which there was a lot of reservations expressed. But this then, when I read this, it reminded me of this. So the UGC was set up by an act of parliament. It was conceived as an independent statutory body. Its independence has been eroded with time. The Science and Engineering Board was set up also by an act of parliament as an autonomous body, but it was conceived as autonomous, but it was stillborn, because the autonomy disappeared almost immediately when its constitution was announced. Today what has happened is this act of parliament has now been subsumed by another act of parliament. We now have the Anusandhan National Research Foundation. Whether this is going to promote science, it's been in gestation for over a decade now and is not yet very clear. The 4-year undergraduate program is a good example. It was an initiative at Delhi University. We started it also at the Indian Institute of Science before Delhi University, but nobody noticed because the Indian Institute of Science is buried somewhere in the deep south. But when it started at Delhi University, in the 2014 elections, this is the only sort of political agenda in which the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP came together. Both of them promised the voters that they would scrap Delhi University's 4-year undergraduate program. So you can now see that political interference in any kind of academic initiative can be detrimental to moving forward in the reform of higher education system. So in chapter 9 of this, it says all this to increase the gross enrollment ratio to at least 50% by 2035. The wonderful thing about having such targets is that the people who set the target are not around by the time we reach the date of the target. Are they realistic? Look at the kind of population that we have, which is burgeoning, and will all this really happen? It's very unlikely. Can you just go back one? Much of what is written was already written, in every other place. And we make these frequent references to Takshashila and Nalanda. Now, there isn't anybody around who can really tell you what they were like and whether you can go back 1,500, 2,000 years in order to move forward. And this is a question which needs to be asked by people who are, they've also completely promised reformation of the regulatory system of higher education. And I don't believe that much has happened in this. This is what we should have had, the Higher Education Commission of India and these 4 legs which were there. But interestingly, all the professional bodies which are powerful, the Bar Council, the Medical Council, all of them were left out of this kind of regulation. And India is the only place where there is a marked difference between professional education and others. All of us who studied science, then I've wondered, have we been unprofessional? And are those who study bad pharmacy, are they now professionally educated? And we need to change these terms. This clouds our thinking about education. This is why we have so many lawyers who come out of places which are poorly regulated. So this was all that was written in the National New Education Policy, and you can go back and look as to what has happened since then. The next one, please. So what can we learn from this? What we can learn from this is what I've pictured on this slide. That as time progresses along the x-axis, on the y-axis, if you now have policy going, you have 2 things which are now going to contribute to the barrier in making policy and eventually in implementing policy. But policy and implementation are in fact separated by a huge well. It's the huge energy minimum into which things will fall. Most policy documents fall into that well and eventually end up in the dustbin there. Political will and resistance. Resistance comes from organized groups. Political will is usually missing, and therefore nothing actually ever gets implemented, and we pat ourselves on the back that a very new and forward-looking policy document is now available. Can I have the next slide, please? We actually have a disrespect for policy. When the new education policy came out and all the seminars began and I began to prepare on the new education policy, I went back and asked the question, what happened to the 1986 policy? I searched for it. I couldn't find it. And then on the Ministry of Human Resource Development, now the Ministry of Education, I found this copy on their website. And this is the copy that they have. They don't even have a final copy. This is an annotated, so I don't think documents are actually taken seriously at all. May I have the next slide, please? If you look at word occurrences in the National Education, autonomy appears 21 times. MOOCs, which was very popular during the COVID pandemic and which Anil Kumar thinks will revolutionize the teaching, somehow disappeared, only appeared in the abbreviations. I couldn't find it again. And I think the editors had actually removed it. COVID-19 did teach us a lot about the difficulties of online education. May I have the next slide, please? So I think much of what is written there is never going to be implemented. Whatever will be implemented, be old. This cartoon summarizes autonomy. Take a look at it. There, of course, is a somewhat unhappy husband washing the dishes, and the wife says, "Keep up the good work and soon I might grant you autonomy." May I have the next slide, please? I hope. I'll conclude by showing you this book. This Pasteur's Quadrant, Basic Science and Technological Innovation, written by Donald Stokes, appeared in '97. May I have the next slide, please? That's the famous Pasteur Quadrant, where use-inspired research and fundamental research are plotted along the two axes. Everybody would like to be in the top quadrant, which is Pasteur's Quadrant. Famous for his work in basic science, famous for his work in applied science, everything's good. Edison, famous for his work in applied science. Bohr, famous for his work in basic science. And of course, the bottom left was left unillustrated. It had no name, so I put up Lakshman's Common Man. So we are all like that. We are looking in average industrial and academic R&D to move around in this space. May I have the next slide, please? So if you look at academic space, the same way, most institutions will have little research and rather poor teaching. Everybody would like to be an ideal university where research is at its maximum and teaching is at its best. And you can see that there will be a pathway for evolution. The biologists today talk about pathways for directed evolution. What we need to do is to really ask, what is the pathway for directed evolution where you take universities in academic space moving in the right direction? The next slide, please. Any barrier which needs to be crossed, and Professor Sharma will agree with me, there's a kinetic barrier. And if you have to cross a kinetic barrier, you have to pay a price. And that price is a problem. Sometimes it's a very large barrier which is we are not able to cross and carry out. So in chemistry, of course, there's another great problem. Sometimes the reactions are reversible. And it turns out that in a lot of our reform, the reforms have also been reversible and institutions have improved for some time, and then again, they have gone back again in the opposite direction. May I have the next slide, please? So this is the barrier. What are the factors which contribute to barrier height? The barrier height, academic faculty will contribute to the barrier height because academic faculty are generally resistant to change. Administrative structures will always contribute to a barrier height. But public will and political ambience are also very important contributors to barrier height. Reform is not easy even within single institutions, however small they are. May I have the next slide, please? Other people have had the same problem. In the University of Texas carried out an analysis like this. I've simply summarized the entire report onto this. You have a very large number of people in universities who are what they call coasters. And then, of course, a very significant proportion are what they call dodgers, who actually don't do very much. Much of the work of any university is done really by very few people. And this is, of course, the famous Pareto principle, where about 20% of the people in any organization will do 80% of the work. Go to the next slide, please. We should stop using rankings, and many people have said this. educationists from elsewhere that we shouldn't be doing this with rankings all the time. Have the next slide. The rankings have a problem, and I will show you one. This is from biology. This is an evolutionary hypothesis called the Red Queen hypothesis. It's taken from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. In this, there's a chessboard. Alice and the Red Queen will come on the chessboard, and they will see these pieces: kings, queens, rooks, bishop, knight, etc. And Alice will tell the Red Queen, we are in a game, let's play the game. So the Red Queen will grab her by her hand, and they'll run around the board. After they've run for a long time, Alice, a very good student, will ask a question. She says, we've been running for a very long time, but we seem to be in the same place, nothing's moved. And the Red Queen, who's an excellent professor, will then say, in the looking glass world, this is how it is. You can keep on running as fast as you want, but you will never get anywhere. Whose fault is it? And since you're all academics, I suggest that the fault is ours. The fault is ours, and you can go back to Shakespeare, and he says, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. So one must figure out some way of local improvements which take institutions forward. Next slide, please. And this on my last slide, I go back to Alice in Wonderland once again. Should we be optimistic? There it is. Lewis Carroll says, sometimes I've believed in as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. And we can also believe that maybe in the next decade or the next 2 decades, the Indian higher education system will show a dramatic improvement. But we are at the present like Alice. We've reached the tree. There's a tree sits at a fork. One road going this way, another road going this way. There's a tree at the fork, and there's the Cheshire cat sitting on a branch, smiling down at her. And she asks, would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? The cat replies, that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. And then Alice says, I don't much care where. Then he says, then it doesn't matter which way you go, so long as I get somewhere. Oh, you're sure to do that if you only walk long enough. Higher education is actually crossed at this kind of crossroads. We don't know which road to take. We don't know where to go. We're not even sure we want to go somewhere. And we need to sort of worry about this in any seminar which deals with education. Can I have the last and my acknowledgement slide? My acknowledgements are really only to the 2 institutions which have provided me a home for my entire professional life and beyond. The Indian Institute of Science at the top left, I was there for over 41 years, and the National Center for Biological Sciences, where I've been there for the last 8 or 9 years. Both of them have been wonderful homes. The most wonderful thing about both these places is they had complete autonomy, and even I could say whatever I wanted in all the years that I've been there. Thank you very much.
Well, friends, I think you must agree with me when I introduced Balaram. I said he's a person who says it like it is. And I think it's a, when Balaram talks, you must very carefully listen for what he does not say. What he says sometimes is interesting, but what he does not say is provocative. And those of us who have heard him for a long number of years, we have also learned to understand what he does not say, okay, which is also equally important. Anyway, I think it's been a great talk. Thank you, Professor Balaram, for taking the trouble of coming to Bombay for this particular occasion. And also, I think it's a fitting talk in honor of Professor Pillai, because Professor Pillai has been preoccupied with education all his life, and I think you have opened up a lot of questions. I mean, as those of us who have worked in this country for a long number of years, we still live in hope, and hope that things can change. And like exactly you said in the last slide, we can wait for what's called the system to transform. That sometimes, like an elephant, doesn't happen very fast. But there are enough opportunities in an institution to change within. And I think we need to constantly look at those opportunities that present ourselves within an institution. We just can't be waiting for everybody else to change, but I think we can change if we possibly want to do it from within the institution. And that's one of the message he said, that the change we need to bring it is all within ourselves first. And if each one of us do not change, how do you expect the world to change? So I think that's the most important part, and I hope that that message is not a message of despair, it's not a message of something that's impossible to accomplish, but I think each one of us in any institution, we think that we can make a small step of transformation, we can, I think, change the whole world. So I think this is an important message to take home, and I'm glad that he could come and deliver this talk. I'm not going to open up this for questioning at this point of time. I think he will be around, and I'm sure he can talk to him during the break. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and thank you, Balaram, for that scintillating talk.
I will request our Chancellor, Sri Samir Somaiya, to kindly felicitate our speaker.
Like to say one thing. You talked about that barriers. So I just want to say that we have a wonderful faculty here which are ready to change and always ready to take suggestions. As far as the administrative structure is concerned, I have to always remind them that administration is meant to serve and the system is not meant to be served. And last, Dr. Pillai, just right now when we were sitting here, I asked him about some issue and he always says, we'll find a way, because he always says that the art, we have to make it possible. So I think that's, we hope to be a university you'll be proud of.
We will now have a short tea break. The tea is being arranged at the back side of this auditorium, and we will resume in 15 minutes.
Technology, Philosophy of Science Education and Gen Z. The chair of this session is a Professor Shivram.
Thank you. As people are trickling down from outside to inside, we should start this session because we are running a little behind schedule. So we should start this session. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce. Can I have the program details, the full program? Yeah. Where? Yeah. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce Professor Arnab Bhattacharya, who is a scientist in TFR and also the Center Director of the Homi Bhabha National Center for Science Education. He is a BTech from IIT Bombay, MS and PhD from the University of Wisconsin, and has, of course, had a stellar scientific career. But what we know more about Professor Bhattacharya is his passion about science education. And he has been a science communicator extraordinary, a person who understands how to tell and communicate science to right from young children to adults like us, and has received several recognitions for his role in making science more accessible to the public at large. And as you know, citizen science is a very important component of our society. So may I request Professor Arnab Bhattacharya to give his talk, Science Education for Generation Z, or perhaps Generation Alpha. Thank you very much. Professor Bhattacharya.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. So thank you everyone, whoever has been responsible for inviting me here. It's an honor to be able to share some thoughts on science education. The title of the session that was given to me was